As a little reminder, Elise is an absolutely incredible person, and while awards and accolades are never expected, they are 100% deserving. Elise has been awarded the Aspect Inspiration Award for Individual Achievement 2015, the Victorian Indigenous Young Achiever Award 2016, and this past year, Elise Muller was appointed as AFL Victoria's first Disability Ambassador. I'll throw over to Elise in Essendon.
Hello, everyone. Take two. My heart is actually racing quite a lot. So people with autism can deal with change, and this just goes to prove it. Just extra adrenaline. Okay. So I'm hoping you guys will see the presenter view. So happy World Autism Day, everyone. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I'm a proud Wiradjuri and Palawa person, and I'm also a proud autistic. What I'd like to say about how I reference my autism is initially I used to call it tree. So I had a bit of a code word around autism. That was because I was quite ashamed of it. It brings a good point of how we refer to autism. So if I was working with a client and they were to use the word Aspie, that's how I would be using, that's what I would be referencing autism as around that. And if they were saying that they're on the spectrum, I'd be using on the spectrum as a reference, and autistic or and all that. Because at the end of the day, it's someone's identity, and we want to really respect the labels around how we identify. Growing up, I thought that I would have a good future initially. I wanted to have friends, and I was waiting to have friends. I wanted to become independent, and I wanted to play sport at the highest level. As I started to realize that I was different, these goals became more wishes. And every birthday, when I was like blowing up the candles, I would wish for these three things. And I following rules and being on the spectrum, Mum was like, you're taking a rather long time to come up with these wishes, which is what she thought. But I was just kind of referencing all the things that I thought of in that year. And then she goes, you can only wish for one thing each year. So I had my list, and every year then I would change to the next one. So if it was 2017, hypothetically, I'd be like, okay, I wish I could have friends that I enjoy playing with. And then 2018 would be, I wish to become independent. This is something that I really, really invested in and manifested. So what type of kid was I? I was the somewhat impulsive kid. I was very loud and hyperactive. And at the same time, I also was quite scared. I was really shy, even though I was loud. And what that means is if someone was to go and speak to me, I'd hide behind my mum, and I would never want to be separated from my mum. And I would try to, I was very much an observer, but I wanted to be included. I remember the first time I felt connected to the world, it was through playing ball sports. So it was about prep and being quite impulsive and being quite someone who was always told, sit down, remember to be quiet, remember to listen, and who had sensory aversions. I learned to not trust myself. But for the first time, when I had this basketball and I was bouncing, I was making a sound. And when I dropped the ball and it bounced back to me, I was having a connection. And instead of like clicking and having stimulation, instead of rocking, what I ended up doing was trying to disguise it with things that were more socially acceptable. So bringing a soccer ball around and rolling the soccer ball back and forth, or bringing a basketball and bouncing the basketball. This became the way that I felt connected and I understood the world around autism. I had the interest of sport was also because it made sense. It was quite a functional thing. There were angles, there were bit of maths involved. I'd put myself out there, and bit by bit, I'd learned that I was different, but different meant that I wasn't wanted. So I would, in PE class, if the teacher got 2 kids to be captains and to choose the teams, they would pick the kids that they wanted on their team, and I'd become like one of the last ones. And then I remember this one time, and it stayed with me forever, when there was me and this other kid, and this other kid had a sling on because he had an injured arm. And I thought, all right, I'm definitely going to get chosen here because I am allowed to play. And they chose the other kid. And then what made it worse was the red captain. It was his turn to pick next. So I just kind of assumed that I was on the red team then because it was his turn and I was the last one left. But instead, he then went to the blue and he goes, no, you can have her. And the blue's like, I don't want her, you can have her. And this was really created from the negative whispers of Elise being different, Elise being pulled out of class and having a teacher aide. And the message from exclusion was that I don't belong, that I can't do this, that I'm not enough, that there's something wrong with me. And again, being different means I am less. Naturally, from there, I created rules to keep myself safe. And those rules were don't put yourself in danger, don't put your hand up in class, all people are untrustworthy. And I guess that's all around low self-esteem, but how that looked for me growing up as a teenager when the bullies weren't necessarily they weren't bullying in a way that I understood. I was quite naive and I'd join in things and thinking that they wanted me, and then they'd end up laughing at me. And when I look in the last 2 years, a lot of the work that I've done on myself in my self-esteem has been changing my core beliefs, because and this is quite personal, but my core belief is that, with it being that I'm not enough, is that people don't like me, and if they like me, then they don't know me, and creating, I guess, excuses as to why I'm right because I have a bias to believe that you're right. And so I remember I was like probably in grade 3 or 4. My mum was already in the car, but I'll say I sat her down, but I felt like I did. She was confessing, she was letting me know that like I was okay and that everyone's unique. And I confessed to her that I'm an alien. Obviously, being on the spectrum, I had already previously looked up the definition of autism and saw that it was a species that was not natural to its the environment. So I saw this as quite correct. I told my mum, I said, Mum, I'm not from here. I'm allergic to this world and I don't belong. Eventually, my mum told me that I had the diagnosis of autism, and initially I cried with relief because I knew that I was different and there was finally a reason as to why I was the way I was. And hearing that there are other people like me, I was feeling like I wasn't alone. So I hopped onto the internet and I read what it had to say about people like me. Google said, autism is a lifelong developmental disability that affects how people behave and interact with the world around them. It may be mild, moderate, or severe. The main features of autism are difficulty in social interactions, communication, restriction, and repetitive behaviors and interest. From this, I learned that autism was a focus on the things that I couldn't do. And I started to detach myself from the label and started to get quite defensive and triggered whenever someone brought up the word autism, which is why I had a code word for it. So in my head, tree or autism was why I saw the world differently. When other people, they would say I'm from another planet. There was things about vaccinations and cures which really confused me because I don't have a disease. The focus was on my bad behavior, things that I couldn't do. And my parents got a bit of backlash around how they were raising me. Autism, for me, when I go through the reports, it was very much deficit-based. Elise won't make friends. Elise takes things too literally. Elise is obsessive. Elise gets distracted easily and can't focus. Elise has processing delay. Elise has high anxiety. Elise struggles with a lot of things. Elise is not flexible and rigid. Elise is rigid. Elise is black and white. Elise can't do grey. Elise is stubborn. Autism means Elise can't. So from that, you could see that the focus was really on what I couldn't do. In a world where my needs weren't supported and I wasn't included and I had low self-esteem, autism was a disability. My interest has always been my sport. So I'd carry the soccer ball around everywhere and it was my friend, my companion. Sport for me was how I made sense of the world. Where I felt that I belonged, it was my motivation to do what I found most difficult and scary, which was be around people, and it was my outlet. One of my goals for sport was for footy. I made the change from soccer to football, and being someone that follows, and it's one of my strengths, follows instructions quite methodically. I had a bit of a training program that wasn't necessarily individualized, and I do struggle with knowing what's happening with my body, and if things aren't kind of structured in the way that there's an end goal, I'll keep going. So what that means is if someone was to say do as many push-ups or the year before and I wanted to make national, and following that training program, I ended up tearing my lateral meniscus. And I went to the surgeon, and I might see if I can change, because I just want to, I'm going to change the screen because I just feel like I'm talking to no one. Okay, cool. So I went to the surgeon and he looked at the MRI and he looked at the cyst and he was like, Elise, you need surgery. And naturally, I was really, really disheartened. And he explained to me that you won't make nationals in time, because I injured myself in December and nationals was in April. My birthday's in March the 18th, just a random if we're going to talk about dates. And I was really upset. And by this stage, I had my knee brace. It was a full leg brace, so I'd lost muscle and I had it was quite swollen, and my knee was locked. And the operation was booked in for March the 20th, and I was like, Mum, I don't want surgery. You need to take me to get another opinion because I'm scared. And once they take something out of my knee, I can't get it back. Also, I was quite scared of anesthetic. So Mum took me to a surgeon and another surgeon, and surely enough, he goes, Elise, you need surgery. And by that stage, that was like two against something that wasn't an option for me. It wasn't part of my plan. And I told Mum, I was like, Mum, if you keep taking me to surgeons, we're going to keep getting the same answer that I need surgery. So Mum took me to then a physician, and this was the beginning of April. Shout out to Dr. Daff. And he told me that I need surgery. And I cried. I had shut down because that meant that it was quite a big test. They were going to take the whole meniscus out. It meant I wouldn't have my sport. And it also meant, well, I'd already kind of accepted that I wasn't going to play in the nationals because by that stage I'd been dropped for insurance reasons. Then you have that choice. And then I was like, I want my knee to get fixed. And then he goes, there are some people in the world that have like an amazing ability where they can control their body. And he told me to look it up, and he goes, there's people that can control their body temperature in Antarctica. There's people who They just have an immense mind over matter. And I was kind of inspired by that, but it didn't make sense. And then, so I was like, what do you mean? And he explained that the brain receives a message from the point of injury, and then from there we get the throbbing sensation, and that sends a message back to our head that there's a problem, and then we make sense of it and say, okay, stop. When I received that depth, like the explanation, I thought, wow, I could definitely be one of those people who control my body. I've been spending my whole life feeling allergic to the world, feeling like things are too loud, too bright, they hurt my skin. And if there's one thing that I've been trained my whole life, it's to control myself and control my brain and to be fixed. And so in the world's fastest, probably not, but in my head, it was definitely a really quick and probably rushed rehabilitation. I had 3 weeks before National, and first week was, okay, get out the knee, get out of the knee brace, go into the pool and walk. And the second week was straight line running, and the third week I was just I couldn't do zigzag running or anything like that, change direction. So instead I just when I got there, I had my knee completely taped, and I changed my game. Instead of being agile, I just brought the person in and then drew them in, got the hands, and then got tackled, but at least it let the game continue. And I played 4 out of 5 of the games. And what I do want to say from that is that was definitely from the strength of the hyperfocus from my autism. And when we hear, so parents out there, when you hear someone, your kids keep saying, but why, we got to look at that as someone engaging, because shut down and withdrawal, you won't get a response, or you'll get a bit of a meltdown when there's a lot of anxiety. But when someone is saying, but why, if it helps, change it in your head, translate it to and why, because that person's still engaging. And by understanding the reason why I'm being asked to do something that's uncomfortable, it's really helpful. Probably don't buy into the whole, I'll give you $2 if you do it, because what that teaches me is that you don't see the value in me doing exactly what you're asking me to do. What that means is that my focus isn't on the goal of growing, isn't on the goal of doing my best. It's just I'm kind of placidly just doing it for amount of time to get the $2. And then from there, after that, I've gone, okay, when I find something really hard, I need a reward guaranteed at the beginning. I need assurance. And instead of the learning afterwards of, growth mindset, what did you learn from it? You looked at the beginning like you were quite nervous. Did you work past that? And really fueling those channels and taking control of the processing system. I'll change screens. I ended up, I don't have the thing on there, but I ended up making, the national tournament. I think I said that. So what we want to do is to change the language. And when we look at that through sport, what I heard my whole way through school was Elise's obsession. Elise's obsession with sport. The message that created was that my interest in sport was too much. My interest in other things wasn't enough. I am too much. I am not enough. It's a distraction. Nothing. We've got nothing to work with when we look at it as an obsession, and it can be taken away as a disciplinary tool. Elise is focused. So if we then change it to strengths-based special interest, we realize that we have the hyperfocus, we have a tool for motivation and a foundation for understanding, and it can be utilized to create focus. Instead of Elise focuses too much on sport and is in a world of her own, it's Elise makes sense of the world through what she understands, and Elise creates a platform where she feels safe to try. My high anxiety is the biggest barrier of my autism. So Sean spoke about it being like a comorbid diagnosis, anxiety, depression. I sometimes feel like I'm just collecting labels each time I go to the psychologist, but I'd rather accolades, to be honest. But anyway, I find my autism isn't as much of it's more the anxiety attached to how I process rather than the actual processing. Because even though I do process things really, really different, it's quite funny when at least my friends find it quite funny when I come up with some random things. But for me, that's normal, and I don't find that difficult. But it's the anxiety around functioning and doing things that I find difficult that is the disability. So I can be social, I can be around friends, but I'm anxious because I don't feel safe. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know, etc. So deficit-based would be Elise is too literal. Strengths-based, which gives you, or solution-based, would be Elise listens to what you say. It's important to be mindful of how you say what you want to say. So there will be misunderstanding if I'm not talking in a way, or like me as the coach to someone on the spectrum, if I'm not talking in a way that they understand, in a way that's specific, and if I'm talking quite broadly, there's going to be miscommunication. But that's about the approach, not the person. Problem-based, instead of saying that we can't cope with or struggle with routine being changed, and we can say, okay, when there is structure and routine is kept, we are setting them up for success. Instead of saying that we struggle with spontaneity and being flexible, we set the person up for success with clear expectations. Instead of saying that we can't cope with struggles or we struggle with anxiety, we set the person up for success by creating safety. And they might struggle with processing information, or I might have a processing delay, but if I'm given one step at a time, I can definitely do that one thing to the best of my ability. And that's how Bulldogs, Debbie Lee, my old coach, would give me instructions. She would say to the whole team, okay, this is our plan, this is the structure. And for me, my strength was just playing instinctively. And so after it, she'd check in with me and she'd go, okay, the one thing I want you to do is focus on this player. This player does not touch the ball. And I'd go, okay, rule, this player does not touch the ball. All I'm focusing on is that player. And that really channeled my hyperfocus. This ensures that the needs are still met, but the emphasis is that inclusion is making changes for accessibility where I can do, I can be, and I can feel my best. Special needs is not a reason to make exceptions of why it didn't work. It's a trigger to implement the needs. So if we look at this as a bit of an example, like in school, for example, this might help parents doing homeschooling at the moment. Leveraging motivation to succeed. It might actually be better because you can focus on really changing it for your young child rather than normally it's not changed for every single one. But Pythagoras' theorem, I didn't enjoy it. I wanted to give up easily, and I had no interest in learning about it because it had nothing to do with what I enjoy. So one time we had a bit of a test, and so I just drew the soccer ball. I'm not some sort of genius. I just was bored and I drew a soccer pitch on the piece of paper that happened to have a maths question. And from that though, what I did was, instead of it going A, B, and C, I ended up going, okay, so there's a goalkeeper or the goals, easy. I can really visualize that because I love soccer. From there, you have the second point, B, which is Elise. The world revolves around me. So it's more interesting if you include me in the explanation. Then we got Messi, world famous soccer player, arguably the best soccer player. I'm really promoting a lot of things that are unrelated at the moment. But then you've got all of a sudden you've got a right angle triangle. By doing this, I was able to spend more time focusing on it. I could try harder for longer, I could see purpose in it and I could understand it better, and it just made it easier to learn. Pythagoras' theorem became one of my best subjects, and I still remember how to do it now, which you don't remember much after you leave school of what you don't use. But that actually helped me a lot with my soccer, and it helped me when I was playing like pool or snooker. Yeah. Once I did learn that accidentally, though, I started applying that to almost everything. When I had to do an essay, when I would always try now then to translate it to my sport. It was only because it wasn't linked to my strengths and learning style that I found school was difficult for me, and sport, going into environments that I didn't know, being social. For a bit of an analogy, neurotypicals, which we use to describe people who don't have different neurological processing, are a bit like indoor boots. They can run on any surface. It's kind of smooth for them. For me, though, the way that my brain works is a bit like outdoor boots. On a hard surface, it's unnatural, it's uncomfortable, it's unstable, and it is hard. But if you put me on an outdoor oval where it's on my natural surface or my natural safe space, I have a better grip than any of the indoors, and I can run faster than the indoors. So neurotypicals are kind of good in any situation. They can go indoor and they can go outdoor. For me, I need a very structured and carefully thought out approach and environment. But when you do cater for my needs and when you do link it with my strengths, I achieve. I'd like to compare that to like playing community and playing at elite. For some people, they would see playing at an elite level as difficult. For me, it was definitely easier than community. At community, my needs weren't really met. I struggled. I disengaged socially because I didn't understand what was happening in the late night dinners. And I didn't really perform very well. And I was seen as kind of less competent. But at the elite level, there was structure, there was schedules. You had to be at a certain place at each time. There were a lot of prompts. They filled all the different learning styles with the way that they were given, and they really invested in every person's needs. They didn't see me as any different, and they knew that their goal wasn't just to provide a good training session where people felt good. Their goal was for everyone to be able to perform. And for anyone to be able to perform, they need to have supports. And so they kind of bypass the whole, why do you need this and is it worth resources and time? They just went, okay, cool, tell us what you need. Tell us if you can implement it, and we'll just create the space for you to implement it. Being younger, though, I'm not sure if I would have been able to say to realize what it is that I needed. If we look back, the people with autism who have made the greatest impact are the ones who use their strengths to make sense of the world and were allowed to improve what they're good at and use their strengths to also improve what they're not good at. If we are given a role where we are valued and we enter a place where we are no longer seen as special needs or disabled, but we are needed, then that's where we're feeling included. And for me, that's where I started increasing my self-esteem, because my whole life it was all about what Elise can't do. But when I stepped into sport, I had a role to play in the world, and I had a role to play in the footy. And so it shouldn't have been Elise can't cope with change. It should have been Elise struggles. If only they knew Elise struggles with change, but Elise is going to cope with 7 school changes and is going to finish year 12. Elise is going to voluntarily change her football team to prioritize her needs. Instead of Elise, this is what I got told in year 10, Elise, you should be in a special school. It would be Elise is going to, in year 10, become a teacher aide, qualified, so then she can realize what is the gaps in the education. Instead of Elise is going to struggle keeping friends because people with autism don't understand relationships, it's going to be Elise is going to study it and have a really invested interest in it, and Elise is going to create her own business where you can buy a friend. Instead of Elise's impulsive and behavior needs severe attention, still, like quite late, when I was about 17, this happened. It's going to be when Elise has a role and Elise has clear structure and channeled hyperfocus, Elise will show up. Elise is going to go to be invited to Government House to have breakfast with the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, Prince Harry and Princess Meghan. Bit of a funny one. I showed up completely nervous because I had to take public transport and I really struggled with it. And also I just had no idea, but I was expecting a lot of people and I was just nervous. And everyone else seemed quite comfortable and they seemed to be talking with each other and doing the social neurotypical things that happen. And for me, when we were addressed by like the army dude, and he told us how we should approach their Royal Highnesses, all of a sudden it was like autism for the win. I know exactly what to do. Meanwhile, the neurotypicals became quite anxious. Therefore, when the approach is right, autism becomes a bit of a superpower. I want to make clear, though, that I am not the exception. I'm not someone who has, I don't know, my brain is, I'm not sure. What it is that I found the way, the approach for what works, and also I'm able to speak a language that my clients understand. But my clients have all achieved amazing, amazing goals. And it's also losing kind of expectation on how long it will take. There's Aiden, who has autism and cerebral palsy. He completed a 5K fun run, which was his goal. There's Josh, whose goal was to learn to ride a bike. And his probably biggest barrier was sensory-wise, and it was going outside, the wind. And what I needed to succeed with Josh was for me to know his special interest. His special interest was Harry Potter, and Lego. So what I did on the first session was I built a bike. Well, he built the bike, and from there I attempted to build a bike as well. But we used his bike anyway, his Lego bike. He used it to kind of go forward, and from there, in his safe environment, he learned in order to balance, you need to pedal. In order to balance, you need to create some speed. And then to get him out the house, I tied, because I had a skipping rope, I didn't have a rope, but the boom box to his bike and played Harry Potter theme song. And that created enough of a safe space for him to get onto the bike. And then there's Anthony. Anthony, I meet Anthony in the adult care place, and he has a severe intellectual disability and autism. He went from 120, that should be 30 kilos. Anyway, he went from 124 kilos to now he was at 87, but he's kind of gone up. But that's all about, what's it called? Isolation, #Corona. I want you guys to remember these amazing people. Some of these in the picture, I still work with, some of them I don't, but these amazing people, when it's got nothing to do with a disability, it's about the approach, it's about the environment. And when we do something and it's not working, we just got to look at what the answers are, and they're normally right in front of us. I want to remove the language around high functioning and low functioning, because it's quite deficit and offensive to pretty much everyone. My ability and inability to access is not a reflection on how much I understand, but how much you understand and can cater for my needs, so I am able to access it. I much prefer high support requirements and low support requirements instead of high functioning and low functioning. It's important to recognize that these support requirements can also change in different environments and with different energy levels. So that explains why when I was at school, my teachers would go, yeah, bad behavior, but she's okay. And when I'd go home, I'd completely let loose and everything. It's because during the day, I built an endurance to hold myself together and mask using scripts, which is why I liked footy, because I could copy the whole, how's it going, mate? Yeah, good, mate. All right, do you want to grab a footy? Yep, 1, 2. Very, very structured, as opposed to kind of normal social interactions. My friends are definitely through my sport, which is also something to notice about with the corona situation, is by losing the social setting and what we're used to, we also lose that platform to use the scripts that we already know, and it becomes more face-to-face communication, which is why we might withdraw. But using this mask and using the script is quite exhausting. Also, everyone's a little bit on the spectrum, a little bit autistic. I don't find this necessarily helpful. Everyone can feel anxious, definitely. Everyone can feel socially anxious. Everyone can have sensory aversions, and these are all autistic traits, but autism is a neurological difference. And even though this saying is to create resignation and understanding, what the harm can be is by saying everyone's a little bit autistic, means that if everyone can cope, and basically when you eliminate a diagnosis, or you eliminate the need, you also eliminate the need for change. And without that change, without that support requirement, because we're normalizing it, the person can't access the approaches and the foundations and the extra support that they require to create accessibility. So I heard from somewhere, it's like, yeah, everyone's a little bit autistic, and then they replied, yeah, just like everyone's a little bit pregnant, because they might have like a bloated stomach, or be hurting from standing, or they might have eaten a lot and they're feeling quite bloated. Needs can definitely become less obvious and less disruptive when they are catered for. And in the different environments and approaches that my autism definitely can be seen as less, but that doesn't mean I'm less autistic. That means that my disability affects me. My disability is being catered for. And eventually what that happens is it eliminates the disabling part of autism. And from there, I can definitely say autism is my superpower. In this situation that we're currently in, change of routine and structure, isolation, uncertainty, and loss of access to special interests in some cases, this can be where autism becomes a bit of a disability. But if we look at how the person, what they had access to in their usual life and try to replicate it. So for example, for me with sport, I got connection and a physical outlet. We don't need to necessarily be outside, as Cal was saying, and we don't need to be outside to access that. We can be inside to do that. The schedule and visuals and checklists. Callie already said this, but yeah, so you can still create that familiarity and meet the needs while in this different circumstance. Disability isn't a reflection on the person, it's a reflection on the current system that affects the person's ability. In the beginning, I explained to you who I was, and then eventually shared a little bit about who I became. However, to the parents, I want you to realize that your child already has the greatness to become their best self. They already belong. The environment hasn't recognized it though. They already have the strengths that they need to improve what they are finding difficult and be a utility. They're already worthy of being in this world. We just need to be able to channel it and create an accessible and inclusive environment and approach. An accessible and inaccessible environment. In an inaccessible environment, my autism was my darkest secret. I blamed it for not belonging, and I didn't want to live. But after learning how to use my strengths to work for me, and after learning that I can, and it's not necessarily that I can't, and fulfilling it, I became an elite athlete. I have lifelong friends, and the third one of being independent. I achieved, but most of all, I'm happy in myself. There are methods that I share in larger talks to how to do this, but fundamentally, having a strengths-based approach and having an inclusive environment is the most important thing. It saves lives, and that's what I wanted to share with you guys. I hope you enjoyed my talk. Oh yeah, I like leave it up, but basically you can hit me up on Facebook, public, not personal. You know, or anyway, and you can like active support or like I don't know, do LinkedIn. You know, I should just replicate the script of, you know, like, share, comment, subscribe. I think that would have been better. I'm better with scripts rather than thinking. I can think for myself, but it's just the processing thing. So in real time, I don't know, maybe I could just be like, anyway, sorry. I'm finished, Sean. Hope you.
That was perfect, Elise. A huge